Said. You are now live.
Okay, thanks. Hi, this is Bevan Bucheister. Welcome to the first meeting of 2021 of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. I do see that we have at least 4 members here: Kate Bohannon, Paul Murphy, Bill O'Leary, and Ann Stevenson. Do we have any other members here that I have not seen on the line? Okay. Well, first, I just want to introduce 2 guests that we have speaking to us tonight, and we're going to let our one guest go first. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. He's here to talk to us about our input on the comprehensive plan and what they've developed so far with the previous input that we gave them from our public meeting and from our internal meetings. And then Barbara Beeler, co-chair of the Eastport Eco Action Committee, is here to join us for that conversation. So we're just going to take care of a few administrative items before we get to that, and then let them go first on the docket there. Also, I did want to add to the agenda, I didn't leave a place for a report out from our Deputy City Manager for Resiliency and Sustainability, Jackie, well, I'm blanking on her last name. Guiled, right, and Racine Hodo. And then we also wanted to add a discussion about the process for taking positions between meetings. So that will be added after our discussion on the comprehensive plan. So any questions about the agenda changes? Okay, hearing none, I would ask us to move forward on the approval of the December 9th minutes, and they were sent by Racine. I just had, did anybody have any changes? Because I had 2 really small changes. There was section B on the discussion on the 101, 103 Annapolis Street. I think it says 3 about the tree replacement. It says 3.1, but it should say 3-2-1. So it's a 3-to-1 replacement. And then on the replanting Anne Arundel County discussion, also under section B, I think it was Jackie Guiled who said she'd share the list with Randy Rao of the spaces to plant trees. So I just have those 2 corrections. Does anybody else have any other corrections? Okay, if there's none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes for December?
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Okay, and a second?
I second that.
All right, and let's have a vote to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Thanks, unanimously approved. Let's see. Oh, yes, we also have to elect our chair and our vice chair for 2021. So in our organizational meeting, which I think all of you were there at our organizational meeting, I mentioned that I would like to be chair for another year, and then Ann Stevenson volunteered to be vice chair. So if anybody else wants to put themselves up, now's the time to do it. And if not, then we could get a motion for the slate.
I motion that we keep Bevan as chair and Ann Stevenson as vice chair for this year.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second that. This is Kate.
Okay, I think I heard Kate second it, and maybe somebody else. All right, and I'll just call the vote then. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so the ayes have it. So I'll be the chair for this year, and Ann Stevenson will be the vice chair.
Thanks, friends.
Okay, so now I want to turn it over to our guest, Eric Lashinsky, and thank you for joining us on about a week's notice to talk about what you are doing with the comprehensive plan. And you are rather new to the city and in charge of the comprehensive plan and have gotten our input. And we want to hear from you about the environment, about the whole process, timeline, and the environmental features of the plan.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all. I've been trying to get around to every group I can, and I was telling Bevan earlier, I can't meet people fast enough because just things tend to take longer right now with COVID, and so yeah, I joined in July in this role. I moved from Texas, where I've been living for the last 10 years, most recently in Austin for the last 5 years. I grew up in Annapolis, haven't lived here in over 20 years, but I'm really excited to be back, and I've been working mostly in private sector, kind of planning and design firms for the last 12 years or so. I did start my career working for National Conservation Group, the Trust for Public Land, for about 4 years in the Mid-Atlantic region. So I got a pretty strong grounding in conservation work with them, and was involved in some projects in this region. So obviously we're in the midst of the comprehensive plan. I got thrown into that process right away. And it's a big part of my job. It's not the only thing I'm doing, but it's at least 50% of my job right now. And I'm also kind of the default bike ped planner for the city. And I wear a lot of hats in my role. As a comprehensive planner, sort of like long range planning is another way to think about it. What is the vision for the city in the next 10, 20 years? I'm not the guy that's reviewing all the development proposals. That's current planning, but I'm figuring out the policies that we should have in place to get to the city we want. And so, in my role, I can think aspirationally, but also actionably. And that's essentially the comprehensive plan, thinking broadly and with some aspiration, ambition, but then also, how do we get there? What are the actionable things we can do to get there? So let me go ahead and I have a presentation. It's about 20 slides. I'm going to try to get through that. And, I guess I'm happy to clarify things along the way. The more substantive questions should be left to the end. Let's see. So I'll just jump right in. Let's see. Bear with me for a sec. So in terms of a schedule, it's been a little bit of a moving target just because of COVID and me joining halfway through this process. It had already started, I think, October of 2019. I started a schedule over the summer. This one was updated. It's as kind of a simple graphic when I gave a presentation November 17th. That was kind of like a citywide webinar. Maybe some of you saw that. It's on our comprehensive plan website. That's really where we're archiving everything we're doing on the comp plan. If you just Google Annapolis Ahead, that's what we're calling the comp plan. You'll get taken to that website. I'm showing a few of the things on the bottom that we're kind of have been working on as part of our analysis of the city, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of these. But we're definitely in the midst of writing the comprehensive plan chapters. The meat of that are the goals, the metrics, the recommendations, and going to keep moving forward on that. We have a couple surveys that are still live on the website. One is focused on redevelopment concepts or types of redevelopment, and the other is focused on transportation. And then we have a simple survey, is what we're calling this, essentially like a 3-question survey. It's basically a way of enabling people to participate in the comprehensive plan with a very low barrier to participation. It's kind of just a gut check on what's important to people. What would change look like in the city? What would fundamentally change your neighborhood or the city as a whole, make it more livable? Trying to meet with the stakeholder meetings. This is, qualifies as a stakeholder meeting. I'm also kind of reaching out to a lot of civic associations, and I'm trying to convene these issue-specific meetings in February, that a couple of which would be kind of carrying on discussions that started earlier in our process, the environment one particularly. So stay tuned for that. And we're going to be presenting to the Planning Commission every month through this, from here on through the spring. So that's another opportunity to kind of tune in and see some progress. We're aiming for kind of a draft comprehensive plan in May that would be like a kind of believable document that you could look at and review and provide comments to. And we're mandated to have a 60-day review period, and so that's what we're aiming for right now. There's a number of things going on concurrently to the comprehensive plan that we are trying to coordinate with, is to include in the comprehensive plan the recommendations from these efforts. You're probably familiar with most of them. The Conservancy's Greenway Mapping Initiative has been a really great thing. It's perfectly timed. I've been pretty involved in that and gave Joanna feedback as that was being formalized, and it's been great to see the input that we've gotten on that. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Basically all of this, some of these are ballparks in terms of when we anticipate them closing out, but it's all really relevant to the comprehensive plan. So Maryland is sort of, I don't want to say unique. I don't know how many states provide this much in terms of specifics for what a comp plan should be, but Maryland does. It mandates these chapters, or they call them elements, that need to be included in the comprehensive plan. And arts and culture is the one that's not mandated. It's important to Annapolis's economy and livelihood, and I think the sense of including it as a unique chapter in the comprehensive makes a lot of sense. These things, they're not as siloed as they appear on this slide. Every major issue that I've had to confront in my role since I've been on the job kind of cuts across almost all of these elements, and it just kind of points to the challenge of addressing these issues in this format that we've been given by the state. Now, this is not a exhaustive list of pressing issues, but it's just kind of the ones that I find myself spending the most time dealing with and kind of trying to make headway on. There was some outreach that was done prior to me joining, and I just wanted to share a couple of the things that came out of that. This word map from the survey that was conducted early on, it had about 350 responses. There's clearly a number of environment related topics on people's minds. And then in another kind of takeaway from the survey, it's interesting to see that green infrastructure network and the plan for resilience are pretty well supported above a number of other needs and issues impacting the city. So that was good to see. So to try to come up with a structure for the comprehensive plan, we were thinking about sort of foundational themes that would be important to the city's future over the next 10 to 20 years, probably beyond that. And equity, health, resilience are those guiding principles that we felt needed. And a lot of this came out of what we heard from community members. There's also just kind of a recognition of the way the city has evolved and the issues that we're dealing with in trying to address community needs. And COVID obviously has been the story the last year. It's reinforced all of these principles. It's kind of shown a light on inequities in almost every place it's impacted. And so from those principles, we came to these three, I call them visions of the city: the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city. And then we came up with these principles within each of those that we felt should be the principles that should be on our radar as we're developing the goals and recommendations of the comp plan for each chapter. These are the things that we should be thinking about, that the goals and recommendations should be reinforcing. And I'm happy to share this presentation with you after this so you can digest it more. We can go back to this for sure. So then you have those chapters I showed you earlier. They fit into these three city visions in this way. And the idea is that each chapter has its own goals, metrics, and recommendations that would look something like this. And this is the one for housing. I should say we're a bit farther along on housing, transportation, land use, and municipal growth. And I'm really in the midst of doing the chapters that would closely reflect environmental goals. And so this is a good timing. I'll share kind of where we're headed with that, but just wanted to give you a snippet of what the structure looks like in each chapter. Metrics are really important. That they haven't been in the comp plan before, but it's important to measure how we're addressing the recommendations, so whether we're being successful. Metrics can be hard to develop in a way that actually helps us. Sometimes it adds more work to actually do the measurements, but it's definitely an important way of being accountable. So that's something that we all in planning and zoning felt that it needs to be in this comprehensive plan. Something that kind of ties to that is this action plan. This is something that would be at the end of the comprehensive plan. It would be kind of a summary of all of the recommendations or actions, is another way to think about those, from each chapter. The metrics would be summarized for each recommendation, approximate time frame, level of investment, where these dollar signs would there be a legend that tells you what kind of range of cost we're talking about. Responsibility is important for accountability. Who's actually responsible for moving some of these actions forward. It's not just city staff, but should be community partners as well. Are there things that need to be done before this action happens or at the same time? And then status, have we started this? Is it complete? Just trying to stay focused on going through the recommendations. So now I want to just kind of go into the three chapter elements that I think are most relevant to the Environmental Commission. Starts with demographics. Because of the recognition that equity and resilience and health are really central to this comprehensive plan and to assessing how thriving a city we really are. Are the most vulnerable populations able to advance and rebound from events or ongoing challenges. We use the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index to kind of do a map of what that looks like for the city. And some of this may be familiar to you. This is what it looks like based on census block group. And it, may not be surprising if you know the city, but where the dark area represents most vulnerable populations, and the light represents least vulnerable, based on that criteria, large group of criteria I just showed you. So the idea is that we can use this base map as an underlay on for a whole range of maps. I'll show you a couple in a second. Land use is another thing that is kind of foundational to the comprehensive plan. So comprehensive plans, they happen every 10 years. And you first look at, well, what does our population look like? How much has it changed? In what ways has it changed? And we basically use the best data we can find. We're in a weird situation where the new census data is about to come out. A decision was made, a couple of years ago to move forward on this comprehensive plan. I suppose there's a chance we might wait for that census data ultimately and see how it has changed. But as of now, we're working with older data. Actually, there's something called American Community Survey, which is a sampling of population change. And that was last done just a couple of years ago. So that gives us a decent sense of where we are. But land use is also, incredibly central to the comprehensive plan. I mean, land use and municipal growth are really, I think where comprehensive plans originate. It's not surprising that land use would be at the center of all this. When you think about it's what people do with their land, what they're allowed to do, as what we as a city allow people to do with their land is kind of a reflection of what our values are. So what I'm highlighting here in these clouds closer to the parcel are the things that we typically look at when we do a review of a new development. And they're measurable. They're things that reflect attitudes on spacing and so forth, massing and bulk and the look of development. Around that, I've shown a few things that could be a way of pushing our code into the realm of what you might call performance-based zoning or form-based zoning, where we're looking at other kind of qualitative goals that could, that the challenge is turning kind of qualitative goals into something that you could actually evaluate objectively. But there are examples of this, and actually just in the city, we have, you could look at our historic district zones, the conservation zones. You could look at the mixed use zone along Inner West Street. We have neighborhood conservation zones, and we have a business corridor enhancement zone along Upper West Street. Those are all examples of kind of form-based code or performance codes. So they're just kind of surgical. We're looking at other parts of the city that could benefit from this kind of thinking, and we're actually doing a test case in West Annapolis as part of the comp plan that some of you might have participated in. So what will come out of this West Annapolis master plan, it's focused on the commercial area of West Annapolis. We think what we're going to get is some guidance on a new type of zoning district that could be more performance-based and apply to other parts of the city where we need some more predictability in what might happen there. when we talk about community facilities, you know, a lot of times people think that shorthand is the park system is one of the most prominent types of community facility. But the thing that I've kind of become really aware of as I've been dealing with the Conservancy's Greenway survey and just kind of the range of open spaces we have that aren't really in the park system. They're not formalized. It seems that there's a need to really connect our active recreation facilities with our passive conservation spaces and to create this kind of green network. And that's just trying to show a quick view of what that might look like when you combine it with our bikeways. I think when I first saw what was called the Greenway map, you know, it was a bunch of easements that the city owned that were kind of disconnected, and you know, they weren't really they were kind of off the map. And it's pretty unique, I think, that we have this Annapolis Conservancy as a municipality, and you know, we're trying to leverage what they do and better integrate their mission with the rest of the city. So that's something that I think is a legitimate goal, and we're in the process of evaluating what we saw on this mapping survey. So I think there will be some opportunities to highlight, and we'll be developing a more formalized Greenway map that shows those opportunities that we can try to preserve and connect to in the next decade or so. And then when you actually do look at our kind of formal park system and you apply this is a 1/4 mile walk radius. It's kind of the standard for open space equity. You know, can somebody walk to a park nearby? And a lot of times it doesn't take into account barriers that might exist, you know, a road that's hard to cross, or a railroad, or other barrier, but it gives you a general sense of where your gaps are. And you know, you can see from this, we're doing okay, I think, as far as you know, in comparison to other cities. I mean, you could go to the Trust for Public Lands Park Score website. In fact, I had that slide in here previously, but you know, this would look very similar to the way they've evaluated Annapolis. And you know, I think they gave us a pretty high score for proximity to open space for residents. But you know, public waterfront access is a subset of that, and it's become a huge issue here. And so it's kind of hard to say that we're doing a great job on open space equity when it's still hard to get to the waterfront. And that's kind of that is the Annapolis experience, I would say, is being close to the water, appreciating it, having opportunities to engage with it, you know. And this is just we're going to fine tune this, but this was a quick takeoff of where we stand on public waterfront kind of linear footage along the shoreline in comparison to our total city waterfront. And you know, there are some obvious opportunities. College Creek is a place that I think has huge potential to be kind of a natural, almost like a central park for the city. I'll show you in a second what that might look like. And Hawkins Cove obviously is a high profile, high priority for us right now. And there are other places that I think have merit for investment. And at College Creek, it's, you know, I think this is an evolving vision, but it's a unique site, I think, from a public waterfront perspective, just because it is significantly less developed than every other creek in the city. It also has a high amount of publicly owned land, not necessarily City of Annapolis owned, but county, housing authority. you can see there's a Naval Academy and state-owned parcels up here next to Rail Boulevard. There's cemeteries, and there are some small park sites existing that we're in the process of improving. So Robert Eads Park, we're working with a landscape architect right now on a rehab and revisioning of that park. And then Northwest Park has a lot of potential as a improved paddle access. But a lot of this land around Adams Academy is underutilized in my opinion, and we're looking at opportunities to better connect with St. John's College. So this is very conceptual. Actually, the Greenway Map Survey, somebody suggested this trail along the kind of the headwaters of College Creek or tributary of College Creek, and it's interesting because it leads right up to DNR's parking lot. I haven't been back there. It would be interesting to see if there's a way to have a new trail segment back there. So some of this is very speculative, but like I said earlier, you have to be aspirational in this comprehensive plan. So the sensitive areas chapter, I'm almost done here. If you look at the way sensitive areas are defined in the state's guidance on comprehensive plans, it's pretty much focused on natural areas, areas that are susceptible to flooding and or have high habitat value. I borrowed this graphic from Climate Ready Boston because I think it summarized, just a simple way of thinking about climate change impacts. We want to expand that definition, I think, here in Annapolis. And so we're in the process of developing an equitable resilience framework for the city that I think one of the goals of which it would be to extend how we talk about resilience from the coastal flood zones into the rest of the city, and what should resilience mean, or climate change to neighborhoods that aren't necessarily at risk of being flooded, but may have significant heat impacts. And so if you look at our flood zones, we're obviously have a big project, the city dock. Eastport, in my opinion, is kind of a no-brainer for a place where you'd want to look at what kind of surgical improvements could be made. It's a lot more challenging, the city dock, because it's a lot of private land. There are some city-owned sites that are pretty susceptible to flooding, but the sort of toolbox they would use in Eastport is a lot different, I think, than what you might do at the city dock, and needs to be just more sensitive, I think, to what's there already. Not to say that we're not being sensitive at the city dock. I mean, it's obviously the historic heart of the city, but it's just the urban fabric of Eastport is a lot different. And but it's probably not a new idea to you all, but then there's the rest of the city. And, I think when I hear that resilience isn't really on the minds of a lot of people who live upland in the city, it's not surprising to me, but what should they be thinking about, and what could we be doing to address resilience in those parts of the city? It's part of what's on my mind. Heat impacts and urban tree canopy are kind of one of the first things that come to mind in terms of what we could be doing differently. I just pulled up numbers from our 2006 urban canopy study. I know from talking to Brian Adams, we have some new numbers that I haven't seen yet that are going to be an update to this, but I think this goal is probably still relevant. It's what we used in the 2009 plan. And And obviously the impervious cover reduction is from our MS4 permit. So this is an area where I feel like I could really use your input on what we should be focusing on. I thought this graphic from the 2006 plan that shows the wards by possible urban tree canopy versus existing, and sort of not surprising that Ward 3 has the highest possible because of, I think it's primarily because of the major roadways that go through there that have been hard to address. But I guess I was a little surprised to see that everywhere else it's well, I guess you could say Ward 4 is in that same category, but and then at the bottom, residential development types are the clear opportunity for where revegetation could be achieved. But the challenge of increasing our urban tree canopy on roadways is real. I know that there's been efforts to do that, and there's a lot of constraints, and it would be great to figure out a strategy to improve on that. And then finally, water resources. This is another area where I feel like I could use your input. I mean, I feel like we have very good, clear direction from our MS4 permit and existing contracts in place to install and to design and implement a lot of green infrastructure across the city to meet our goals here. This was actually one of the goals that came specifically from earlier input from you all. And so I'm trying to figure out, we're obviously on a path to doing more, but are there avenues for improving our efficiency here, or coordination, or maybe it's how we use fee in lieu from critical area projects. I don't know. There's probably a number of places where we can improve, but it does seem like we have a lot going on in this area. And I was, just kind of closing here. I mean, I was really pleased, when I came back to Annapolis and saw the number of living shorelines that have multiplied in the region. It's exciting to me. I wonder if this is a best practice that we should be doing more. It's costly. I know it's challenging to implement these, but I see them as achieving a number of goals, and it seems like an area where we could be supporting more. And then finally, this is just it doesn't specifically relate to, or it's not exclusively focused on environmental goals, but one of the things we're going to be doing in the comprehensive plan is a series of case studies. In the past two comprehensive plans, there were identification of priority areas for development, and in some ways we are going to still have that, but rather than trying to guess, take our best guess at where new development might happen, we want to develop these case studies as kind of demonstrations of the ideas in the comprehensive plan. And these are places that all could use a rethinking. They're places that we felt were underperforming, not just from a fiscal perspective, but from environmental or transportation, or in the way that they're compatible with adjacent development, adjacent communities. And there are opportunities, in my opinion, to kind of think differently. So for each of these sites, we're going to be doing a kind of conceptual revisioning, conceptual scenario of what a new development might look like. There's really no, with the exception of the old public works facility, which is owned by the city, we have no expectation that any of these are going to be redeveloped tomorrow. But and even with the public works facility, it's not going to be tomorrow. But there are places that will likely, have a high chance of change in the next 10 to 20 years. And we want to get ahead of it. We want to basically try to bridge that historic divide between the developer and the community, and maybe we can find some more middle ground there before something gets proposed, and then we're kind of, everybody's scrambling to figure out what to do. So that's kind of a big part of the comprehensive plan, is trying to get ahead of some of this stuff. I'll leave it at that. Talked a little longer than I expected, but I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think that was really a huge overview, and I've been taking notes on this and have a lot of input to give you, but I wanted to open it up to our members first to ask, if you all had any questions or any recommendations or comments on all of that Eric just said. So just hop in, members, you're welcome to hop in first. And Barbara, let me just let the members go first, and then we'll get to you as well.
I can put it back on the screen if somebody wants to reference something. Yeah. I can't see you when I'm showing it, so that's the problem.
Well, let me start out with a question, and I'll let our members warm up. So we've got lots of ideas to help, improve water resources. And one of them is when we're redeveloping, like places like the Eastport Shopping Center, where they're redeveloping that into like mixed use housing, and it's retail and housing. One of the things they didn't have to address was their very, very large parking lot, and because they're only doing half of it. So I mean, the only opportunity the city has to get them to redo the whole parking lot is when they're redoing this. So what kind of incentives can we give them to redo the parking lot? And we talked to them early on when they were still in the planning phase and hadn't sunk too much cost into the planning phase, and they said, we'll do, and they were offering to do an off-site thing, like an outfall, right? And well, I thought, well, the city's already in charge of that, and that's pretty inexpensive to do, but we can never get back there and do their parking lot once their project is done, and it'll take another 50 years to get back there and redo the parking lot. So like, let's get them to do those things that are in those hands and out of our control when they're redeveloping those things. Another big thing that I just was, kind of shocked by was this Parkside Preserve development that, we had a lot of input on, and we were trying to save trees there. And we did get one part of the lot preserved, but I just went to look at it, and it is huge. I mean, it is massive. It's behind off of Forest Drive. I mean, it's probably about 2 football fields long, and it is just scraped there's not one blade of grass left there. Topsoil scraped off. Like, there's got to be a better way to develop from that, where you don't scrape off every tree, shrub, and blade of grass, So let's think about what those are, and maybe make permitting quicker for people that do it in a more environmentally friendly way or something. There's got permitting takes a long time and costs a lot of money, and it does for restoration projects too. I mean, that's about where half of their money goes, is the permitting. So yeah, let's think of some ways to incentivize more environmentally friendly development. I want to open it up to the Environmental Commission members.
I just had a quick statement. How you doing? My name is Randy. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Just in regards to the resiliency plan, one thing that I've been seeing a lot doing in Baltimore City is, them using the extreme amount of opportunity that exists in communities to build capacity. I didn't see anything much there about, training programs for sustainability careers, or even like entrepreneurship opportunities for some of our public housing communities, which, per capita is the most in the country. So that's one thing I would really like to suggest is, looking into training programs, workshops, seminars for some of these populations so that you can build capacity to solve some of these environmental issues through those people. And that's a big capacity there that is, you don't want to leave out and miss that, because one of the main issues in regards to resiliency for the most vulnerable is the maldistribution of wealth and resources. So one way you can alleviate that is environmental justice technique by providing this workforce development opportunities through training, sustainability careers, green careers. So now you have your plans to become more sustainable in certain areas, but you're also on the back end creating an entire workforce that can actually go in and accomplish those goals. Especially with the tree canopy as well, working with minority vendors to do tree canopy plantings throughout the city, that the city designates areas that can be places for replanting, and then finding funds to fund a program like that. And I want one kind of a case study or example of one that I would say maybe check out is the Arlington County's comprehensive plan. Arlington County has recognized himself as the Copenhagen of America, and they have gone to great lengths to give their entire city a facelift. And the way that they've been successful by doing that is through a lot of their resiliency techniques and training programs and incentivizing sustainability through development companies and things like that. So,
is that Arlington? That's Arlington, Virginia, or a different Arlington?
Yep. Yeah, Arlington, Virginia. Yeah.
Interesting. I knew they were doing a lot of ambitious things, but I had not been following exactly.
Yeah.
I'll definitely look at that.
And then Robert E's Park, I was just wondering, do you have anyone working with you in that development that knows Robert E's, is from Robert E's community of Clay Street? Because if not, you may want to look into that just so that you can always say that, hey, we have someone working in this vicinity that's dealing with this issue or this development that actually is a stakeholder in that gentleman's world. That's very important because so often we see that not take place. And then also for all of the development that you're going to plan to do in Robert E's Park, I'm looking at the opportunity to only consult with minority-owned vendors only, because that would be literally the epitome of Robert E's in his craft, which is for fairness, equality, and justice in regards to how we distribute our wealth throughout our city of Annapolis, and trying to lift up those who may have been fairly marginalized or underserved by building them up in that regard. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing I found from, I work closely with Steve Rice in the planning and zoning. He's our economic development manager, and from talking to him, I mean, it sounds like something we need to do is an assessment of minority contracts in this. I think that has not been done before, and so that's something that we're going to be recommending in the comprehensive plan. And we do have a small business and minority coordinator, Hope, that you might know, but I do not believe that we have a city policy on that. So I think we defer to the state or to the county. So that could be a way we innovate. I think I agree with everything you're saying. I think I'm still trying to figure out, when it comes to getting some of these programs off the ground, where in the city we have the capacity to kind of shepherd these things, because I could see some of it definitely happening within Parks and Recreation. I could see some of it happening, through the mayor's office, or I know there's plans for
another place that
Office
we
of
could really
Community
plug in.
Services.
Yeah. We could really plug in with that is the Green Vest contract to do the stormwater. I think we have a $20 million contract with them over like 20 years, I think it is, for them to partially develop plans. But Prince George's County had a really great success with putting in a requirement for 30% of the projects to be done by small minority-owned businesses. And they really learned a lesson in there too, in that they didn't have a record of that many businesses participating with the county before, minority-owned businesses. But the reason why, when they found out, when they brought a private company in to work with them and recruit them, they didn't even think they'd be able to make the 30%. They put it as an aspirational goal. They blew through that goal. They made that goal easily. And the reason why they weren't participating was the county was a late pay, and you cannot pay small contractors late because they cannot turn around and cover their payroll. So once they got paid on time, they could participate in these things. So they had really great response. So that was a good lesson.
And one example of that would be Replant Anne Arundel is a good example of that, where they pay out vendors before they do the work.
Oh, right.
And that's just to alleviate that exact thing. They had to.
Yeah.
Right, and that's a best management practice for dealings with minority-owned vendors, because a lot of times they're small businesses, they're small, they're upcoming.
Yeah.
And so that's just a BMP in that regard.
So I want to jump in here for a second and try to help Eric out with that question. And Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what Eric's doing is a heavy, heavy lift. I mean, he's looked at everything throughout the whole city, and this is a planning document that shows where we will be, where our zoning will change, will not change, where the critical areas, where we're trying to tie in green spaces, and where we're doing commercial and maritime zones and different overlays. What it doesn't address is implementation type of things. So Randy, you're kind of getting to when contracts are awarded to build this project or to plant trees or to do restoration work, then that's that step when we get involved in minority businesses and small businesses and women-owned businesses and things like that. But Eric's big lift is really just the planning stage for what the land uses are and how all the other goals like greenways and things and bike paths get integrated into that. The construction part is not Eric.
The where, not
well,
the how.
There is, I mean, it is within the framework of the comp plan to have recommendations for programs that would help us achieve goals. So we don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
It helps if we can kind of put some responsibility on, if you suggest, it would be, an improved minority hiring program around tree planting would help to address an issue, we've identified. But cost is an issue, staffing is an issue. So it's basically like it helps us come up with a to-do list for the next several years, and then we have to kind of figure out how we can make it work. And the more detail we can put in there, the better. But you're right, Jackie. I mean, it's not gonna give us all of the answers, but it will help us prioritize, some ways of doing things. I like to think of it as policies, projects, and programs. I mean, all of those are fair game in the comp plan, but it probably leans more to the policy recommendations. But,
right. Yeah, and those are policy recommendations we need to make to our, the people like Steve Rice and Hope Jacobs, and to Brian Snyder in our procurement office. So we can make our recommendations on all the planning we're doing, but for implementation of those policies, and I don't know that we have formal policies on some of these things like environmental equity and minority businesses and women-owned businesses, small businesses. I'm not sure what kind of policies we have there. It's my good question for Steve Rice and Brian Snyder. But I said, good, we can make recommendations, but to implement them is kind of some beyond some of the staff. You know, it goes to other staff to implement.
Right, so they're more high-level policy statements, and then, but then it's going to fall on other people and divisions and us to keep following up to get that actually
Right.
that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a greater chance of this stuff moving forward if we brought in the folks that are best suited to carry out some of this. You know, that's really important.
Right.
You know, last thing you want is to you know, have a draft comp plan and people looking at it like, oh, you know, you're asking me to do what? And that's
Yeah.
not what we're trying
Oh,
to
and
do.
that brings
So-
up just a comment I had on the action plan and responsibility. You know, I really like that action plan you did, and that's kind of the format that we did our goals and for our environmental commission. You know, like who's the lead person, how much is it going to cost, and how how we're going to get this done. I will say on the action plan, I think there ought to be a city lead person identified or department identified, because, you know, when you make it, if you put a whole bunch of different ones down there and everybody's in charge, then nobody's in charge and it doesn't get done. So I would definitely identify the lead department that's supposed to be in the lead on those things. Are there other comments? We do have to wrap up this discussion because we only have an hour left and we got to have the rest of our meeting too, but would love to have some more discussion with you on other different aspects of this plan. Any other questions from the members or comments?
It looks like Kate and Allison have their hand raised.
Oh, okay. I didn't see
Allison
that.
was first. You can go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly here. Eric, thanks for the presentation. It really struck me, especially when we were looking at the parks and green spaces layer and you had the buffers, the quarter-mile buffer around them, as well as the waterfront access. I don't know if it's part of the comp planning process or if it could be achieved through surveys or interacting with people through their feedback on the comp plan, but I think it's really important to not only just know where those things exist on the map, but know if they're actually achieving the goals that we think they are or hope that they are in the comp plan. I'm thinking specifically of one waterfront city-owned property where technically it is open to the public for their use, but the use by people visiting the concessionaire that operates there basically overwhelms any other access or use of that space. And it's not the fault of the concessionaire or the people that are attending, you know, to do those activities, but it's not functioning in a way that it is readily accessible and open to the public. So I don't know how you could get at that information or account for that in the comp planning, but just thinking forward, you know, if you're just looking at a dot on a map, that counts as there's waterfront access in this place. It exists, but maybe it's not actually functioning in the way that we think that it is. So I would just put that forward as something to think on and something that I'd be willing to help try and think about how that sort of information gets to you, because it's not going to be easy information to get. It's really going to have to come from people and their experience in using those spaces. Your point as well, in the quarter-mile buffer, it doesn't show some of the challenges that people can have getting to or using those spaces. So I just wanted to sort of comment on how we get that information, or if there's a way to incorporate that into the plan as well. Thanks.
Great points. Yeah, I can tell you, I mean, what would typically happen, you know, even if we just had some anecdotal examples of those parks that aren't really functioning the way they're supposed to, they're not as accessible as they should be. A reasonable recommendation would be for Parks and Rec Department to do an equity-oriented assessment of parks and open, access-oriented study of parks and open spaces. That would be a pretty good recommendation, I think, you know, and we haven't done a Parks and Rec master plan in quite some time, which is a problem. I think, you know, that's something that can be used for funding opportunities. And I think the last one we did wasn't adopted. And that is something that would typically, well, especially today, today's world, an equity oriented focus, needs assessment would really be a central part of that. So.
Yeah, that's really important. I've been telling the city about the Great American Outdoors Act and the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but you need to have a plan. You need to have a recreation plan to access those funds. And, some of them are grants and some of them are loans, but any other comments? So any other comments from the members? And
I think
Barbara too. Go ahead, Kate.
I am curious about, I've stepped away for a minute, so I don't know if you already covered this, but the Forest Drive sector study, our board had provided input to that, I think back in 2019. And I'm just wondering, how does that feedback relate to this effort? Or are you using that feedback to inform this effort?
Yeah, I mean, we're using the recommendations that are in the report that task force is issuing. I've been sitting in on the task force meeting since I came aboard, and participating where it makes sense, although I'm not technically part of the task force. I can't, because I came on, over the summer, I can't really speak to how accurately they're representing the feedback you provided. It's, because the task force is just dragged out for so long. I feel like the core group is fairly small at this point, but they're wrapping up the report, and the idea is that we're integrating the recommendations where they make sense in the comprehensive plan, and then that report will be part of the appendix to the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
There are definitely environmental recommendations in that report, the draft that I've seen. I assume
Okay.
that,
Yeah, that's good to hear, because our board's feedback was there was a lot about community character and having storefronts, but there was very little about tree canopy and stormwater and environmental factors in that in the sector study. So we wanted to have them integrate that as well. So, yep.
One of the things we took away from the Forest Drive sector study, prior to the task force, that one of the original recommendations was the environmental enhancement areas, typically with a future land use map in a comprehensive plan. It often just kind of throws all the parks, open spaces, forested area, informal open spaces into one category. And I think what we recognize is that there's kind of two. There's the sort of the active recreation sites that are already part of our park system, and then there's the forest conservation areas and other green spaces that probably will not become active recreation facilities, but should be identified as environmental assets to the city. So that's something I'm happy that we're doing. Comes right out of the Forest Drive study.
Okay, Ann, go ahead.
This maybe is where you're headed too, Bevan. I guess my question for you, Eric, is, we as the commission, as Kate just mentioned, we made lots of comments on Forest Drive and Eastport, and then, sort of who knows what happened next. We sent a lot of recommendations to the AEC. No, we're the AEC. The Conservation Board about the Greenway plan. And it would just be nice to hear from you how you think we can be most helpful moving forward with the stage that you're at of the plan. Because I think sometimes we sort of write a bunch of comments or write a memo and then don't really know how to be most helpful after that.
Mm-hmm. I think with the Forest Drive, I think it's so close to being wrapped up. I think at this point, I hate to say it, but I think we just have to hope that, your recommendations are integrated to the degree you wanted. I think with the Conservancy's Greenway survey, that is, they closed the survey. We have these recommendations. What I'm doing, I'm going through kind of recommendation by recommendation and trying to figure out if there's any conflicts with projects that are happening right now, or
I think, yeah, maybe Ann meant for like the comp plan for next steps for us to, because I mean, there's so much you mentioned tonight. I think we could spend the whole rest of the evening and the next meeting on this as well. So, I mean, for future comments, what's the next steps for us to take to coordinate with you?
So, I mean, I would like to come back to you guys at your next meeting with some with some progress, you know, because I think that's really like the best way for us to be kind of out front and share. I mean, we don't have any, aside from our presentations to Planning Commission, we don't have any plans to sort of share interim content for the comp plan, you know, in like a document form that, you know, you could kind of mark up or something. So I think it's you know, we have this plan to come out with a draft document in May, but I think it would just be helpful to kind of get on your agenda again. I mean, I'm trying to convene this environmental, just kind of I don't know, brain trust. It's probably, you know, ideally it should be people from your group and then other people who are not on the commission who have a investment in environmental issues in the city. But
yeah, and we called it, like when we held it, the outreach to the environmental community, or anybody who's interested in environment, we called it the environmental summit. But we definitely can share the names of the people that were there with you.
Yeah, that would be great.
But the one thing that that I knew we have to do a little bit more work on is reach out to the Black and the Hispanic community, because we didn't really have members there from those two communities. And we were planning on holding meetings in their wards, but then COVID hit, so that kind of nixed that. So we just have to be more intentional and do it, you know, virtually. But so the PowerPoint that you just went through, is that something you can send to us so we can look at it and give some input on that?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the space in your agenda, you know, feel free to include me.
Sure. And are you talking like next month, or what's the time frame for that? Are you thinking?
Yeah, like next month would be awesome.
Okay.
I work well with external deadlines, so.
Yeah, we can focus on the you know, really on the environment and the things that we, you know, that we have comments on. So we can promise to look over your PowerPoint and get some comments and thoughts together.
That'd be good
to discuss next month.
Okay.
Yeah. So Barbara, I know you wanted to join for this, and do you have any questions? Because we do need to move on to the rest of the agenda.
The one thing, hi Eric. Eric has been very helpful. I'm co-chair of the Eco Action Committee of the East Civic Association. So appreciate your comments about the humongous parking lot, Bevan, and efforts to try to take care of that. I've been tasked by our board to basically think about the resilience section. And there's one thing that you said this evening, which I'd like for you to maybe reevaluate, Eric. It's important to understand that the plan for resilience from the public survey was really the most important thing that the survey, the respondents, that put it at number one. 73 strongly agree and 21 agree. So that's basically 94% of people who responded put that at the top for where they want the comprehensive plan to be. And we don't know what they meant by resilience. We will never know. But I think they meant climate resilience. And I think it might be helpful to be sure that we're using the same language, and that climate resilience, and then you could, under the adaptive city and your various objectives under that, you know, task that out with what that means specifically, but I do think it's worthwhile to have the resilient climate resilience. I do think that people, it isn't just waterfront issues. It's stormwater, it's heat islands. We all know how hot it is during this.
You just went on mute, Barbara.
So I would just think that keeping the climate resilience for the whole city is an important frame, and not to sort of put it to, you've moved it to sensitive areas. But keep that, and then let's work down from that. And then the only other thing, Bevan, that I do want to, a tree is not equal to another tree. The South Annapolis Yacht Center tree massacre that took place with the development there. And the trees have been replaced by now dying firs that along the frontage. There's no comparability for what we have lost, what the roots have done, the cooling, the stormwater. So I think when we're thinking about trees, we have to look at the health of the trees and the kinds of trees. It isn't a one-for-one.
All right, thanks, Barbara. So yeah, we only have 45 minutes left for our meeting, so the rest of the meeting. So I think we need to move on. And thank you, Eric, so much for talking to us. And I will get that PowerPoint. If you get that to me, I'll get it to the rest of our members, and we can look over it and provide some more in-depth comments, and get you back next month to talk, you know, a little bit more about, you know, deeper topics and more content in our area.
Thanks for all your comments.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. So I did, the next thing on the agenda was a report out by Jackie and Racine. And then I wanted to talk about the process for taking positions between meetings. So Jackie and Racine, do you have I just wanted to give you a couple minutes to report out. I know the Waterways Cabinet met since we met last time, and I did not make that meeting. I'm hoping Randy made it, so I want to just hear from you for a few minutes.
Okay, I have at least one item to report on. Jackie and I went on a site visit today to the Ellen Moyer Park, to the project that was taking place there. They are essentially done with the project, except there is still some planting that's going to be done in the spring. They've already done some planting. They're going to finish up the planting in the spring, and it's a step pool conveyance to address stormwater. And it starts upgrade and moves downgrade and spreads the water out as it hits the bottom there. So with that project, what they were saying is that what they'd like to do is a next step, which would be they took it to the water line, and at the shore there. And any work that would have to be done, it would include MDE, the Army Corps of Engineers, and other entities like that. So they stopped just before they'd have to deal with those entities. Now they're talking about the next step is along the shoreline. They're putting in a living shoreline slash habitat restoration.
And so who's they, Racine? Who's they? Who's working on it?
Oh, I apologize. It would be the Maritime Museum, Alice from over at the Maritime Museum. At our meeting today, we had DNR we had the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and we had the city as well as the Maritime Museum represented. This project was paid for at least in part by the DNR, a DNR grant. The next phase, what they're saying is that they would potentially work with DNR, and DNR would take care of the design and build aspect of the next piece of the project, where the work would be done by the DNR. But the reason why we were there is because of the partnership that the city now has with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and having funds available for projects that qualify. And so what they would need, DNR would take care of the design build, and what they would need would be additional funds for materials. So the RFP is due, I think it's March 3rd or 4th. And so I'm sorry?
The 5th.
March 5th. So they're going to be applying for funds for this next, what they're calling the next phase of this project. Also, while we were there, they pointed out across the street, this is right where the curve goes from Edgewood to Bemby Beach Road, that curve there, right next to the park. And across Bemby Beach Road, just as you're coming off the curve, there's been discussion for years of a potential development for 40 townhouses, or I think it's 40 townhouses.
Yeah, it's big.
It's big. But one of the aspects of this project, they've been, according to Alice, this discussion has been going on for about 11 years now. And so it's not in the offing right away, but one of the things that's required of this development is to provide public access to the water. And I think that might be an issue they're dealing with. Alice mentioned that she's had a conversation with the mayor, that the mayor knows these developers, and that he's going to reach out to them, because it's being suggested that if possible, try to acquire the land and see if the developer would be willing to sell, so that the land can be acquired and something more environmentally friendly can be put there. So I don't know exactly what the mayor is reaching out to say, or if he's just checking to see if they're open for selling. One of the issues that I'm sorry, Bevan. One of the issues that the developer has is there is a homeowner there that's still there, that's in the way of the progression of the project. And according to Alice, the homeowner doesn't like the developer and is saying that he's not going to sell. So there's a lot going on that's tied up in what might possibly happen across the street from Ellen Moyer Park. And I could just try to keep you in the loop as we find out more as it moves forward.
So Racine, they're across the street from the water, right? Do they own do they own any of the waterfront developers?
Okay, my understanding is there's about 5 acres that they're looking at, but the homeowner that's on part of that 5 acres is in the way of them moving forward, because I'm being told that the homeowner doesn't want to sell to the developer. He doesn't like the developer.
Right. Also, it's their home.
So
they live there, right?
You know, it might be something that if we reach out to the homeowner in the future, that, you know, he'd be willing to sell to the city. They were saying that potential funds could come from the National Park Service, the Chesapeake chapter, or potential funds from Project Open Space. Program Open Space, and that's also funds could come from Land and Water Conservation Fund, but we have to have a recreation plan to be able to tap those funds. Right.
And The other thing is we could look into just getting an easement on that property and, you know, conservation easement, we have a conservancy, you don't pay as much for an easement and then, you know, and you could, you know, put it in there that, you know, we can do living shorelines or improvements and things like that. So, I mean, that's the way most conservancies go now. They don't actually buy the land, they just get an easement on it. So that's a lot cheaper than buying it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Sorry. I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, I think
gonna
that's one
lean on
spot
Jackie
we,
for that as far as getting that information, I guess, to those that need to hear it. I'm just letting you know
Yeah,
what
okay.
the discussion is right now.
Okay. So, yeah, and so Allison, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that parcel or maybe one immediately adjacent to it is one that we had just commented on as a priority conservation area in our comments on the Greenway. tool.
Okay. All right, good.
Is there a way I could see that RFP that you were talking about? The request for proposal?
Yeah,
I mean, not one you submitted, but just what it is.
Jackie, can you give me
Not
or help me give more
not
information
what you all
about-
submitted. Just
I'm not sure what the question is.
Yeah.
RFP for what?
Are you asking about for the funds that they're asking for from the city and the CBT?
well, yeah, I was wondering what grant it was. That's all. I was just wanting to look at what grant it was for.
The grant that they got to do the work that they've done?
Or is this the Chesapeake Bay Trust, the money they have that Annapolis is like giving to them to give to restoration groups? Is that what the money,
Yeah.
is that what you wanted information
Yeah,
on?
where the
Cindy?
city
so-
and
So the project we were at today was not done with that money. That was a separate, the SPCA, the Maritime Museum Education Center off Carrollton Road. That one is, that was done with separate grant funding to DNR that the Maritime Museum pursued on their own.
Mhm.
This year is the first year that the city has participated with the county and the Chesapeake Bay Trust in providing a pot of money. It's $300,000 we provided to the trust for applicants to make use of, to county and city programs. And that's on the Chesapeake Bay Trust website. It's under the, I think it's titled Anne Arundel County Restoration Fund. And it's for coastal resilience projects, mostly impervious surface, shovel-ready projects for the most part. So Racine has been going on, it's one of the prerequisites to apply is that the trust meets with the applicant and the city or the county, as the case may be, on site to discuss the project before they even put in a grant proposal. So that was what today was all about. This is an add-on to the existing project that they just finished with separate funds from DNR. And they wanted to know, if the city is amenable for them putting in a grant, for this site. And Racine's been on a number of other site visits. The trust told us today that there's been about 9 requests for site visits, and they kind of vet them so they don't use up our time. And they've taken Racine on 4 or 5 visits or something like that. And then, so all of those site visits have to be taken care of, I think, in early February. And then the grant requests have to go in, I think, early in March. And then they make awards in the spring. And they're year-long grants. Now, I've got another one. We're looking at Hawkins Cove. The mayor has ideas for Hawkins Cove and what he wants to happen there. This is separate and apart from that Chesapeake Bay Trust Fund that we've funded. And he has met with Janet Davis, the ED of the trust at Hawkins Cove, to discuss, not only restoring that cove and perhaps doing some dredging there, but also what it would look from the water towards the land. So what do the residents of that area from Ward 8, surrounding areas, really want to see at Hawkins Cove? Do they want a floating dock? Do they want to be able to launch boats, go fishing? Do they want a picnic area? Do they want volleyball court there? Because the shore side of it is covered in bushes and weeds and debris and all kinds of mess. And so there's opportunities there to make it more of a community park as well as a restoration project. So with that in mind, I've been tasked with making this happen for the mayor, and we have a grant deadline March 5th to decide whether we're going to submit a concept plan or engineering design funding. Just depends on what we can get done before the grant deadline with Public Works. What we're doing in the meantime is holding some community meetings to solicit input on what the community wants to have there. I have a strategy meeting with staff tomorrow to discuss how we're going to do the outreach. But meanwhile, one opportunity kind of fell in our lap because Ross Arnett is holding a town hall in Ward 8 in Eastport tomorrow night at 7, and Will Rowell and I have some time on that agenda to present the idea and solicit input from the people who participate in that town hall. That's just the first of several community outreach meetings we're going to do for Hawkins Cove.
And I was just going to say another thing with that Hawkins Cove. That's Land and Water Conservation Fund money, and Congress just passed the Great American Outdoors Act. 30% more money is going to states this coming year. So every dollar we spend should be matched by that because it's a 50-50 match requirement. So, I mean, we just got to get our SCORP plan, our recreation plan. And, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, you know, take the old plan, update it, and you know.
The old Park and Rec and Parks plan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about that offline, Bevan.
Okay.
How to get that going. And so just a few other highlights. I'll just give, there's a lot going on. But just a few highlights you guys know. I know we're all interested in composting, and I'm working with Public Works on, there's been a composting study done for the Old Annapolis landfill. Jim Pittman is a consultant with Public Works who worked on that. He is having it updated. We should have a additional technical memoranda sometime this week by considering the addition of biosludge as a feedstock for the composting facility. Where we would obtain such sludge would be from our wastewater treatment facility, which we operate. We share about 50% of the cost with the county. The county maintains it and operates it, and the city helps pay for it. And then we all pay for the disposal. Now, right now, we're carting sludge all the way over on the Eastern Shore and into Pennsylvania and into Virginia at considerable cost, and with a cost to the environment, of course, with the transportation environmental problems that are associated with that. So then our refuse obviously goes to in northern Anne Arundel County, and our recycling goes to another facility. So, and then our yard waste goes all the way to Peabody County. So the initial thought was to look at the feedstock from yard waste, but now we're considering the biosolids. We need the county to participate in this project in order to have enough feedstock to make it a viable composting facility. Last year, the county had said they weren't interested because they have a long-term, low-cost contract, but they said if we added sludge to the composting facility, then they would be interested. So we are at that point now where we are considering sludge as well. In the future, we would also add food waste, but in the beginning, it's easier to design for just feedstock for yard waste, sludge. We are also going to implement, so that's going on right now in the next week or so. We're trying to get this, see if the county will play ball with us. We also are getting ready to, we put into the budget for FY22 a pilot program for residential curbside food waste composting collection. So we've got some initial numbers and ideas. We're thinking about Hunt Meadows as a neighborhood for the pilot program. And if approved in the budget, that we wouldn't have the money approved until July. So we would probably implement that program in August, September, sometime in that time frame. Any questions on composting?
Jackie, would you? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to roll for a moment. As Bevan said, speaking of, it doesn't have to be perfect. Here comes my idea, or Jackie. I think the reducing the travel distance for low value byproducts can be such a financial home run that compared to existing costs, let alone the environment, just the wear and tear of big, heavy utilities going back and forth all those miles, So if we could get a compost, and that was interesting what you said, food waste would be later. I didn't know all the segments of that. But then I think, okay, the city's got yard waste and sludge, I guess, responsibilities to take care of yard waste, comes in our trash bill, et cetera. But compare that to the potential food composting, and I don't know what the numbers are, but I bet you would seem food composting would be potentially a fairly heavy weight. There's a lot of water in it, and it's expensive stuff, and I know nothing about downstream the residual value of stuff that we discard in society, but if we reduce and transfer, it's all low value stuff. If we can lower the transportation costs and just show that, let alone the environment,
right?
I think that's a really big home run. It's local jobs. It's it's keeping the stuff. So I'd love to. That's something I'm interested in. I think that's and I'm a big fan of Veterans Compost and other composters who I don't know as well, but just having trucks going back and forth on the road is just stupid on top of stupid.
Yeah,
for excessive distances is what I meant to say.
Right. So they just for the
I think it's a viable target.
Yeah, I think just for the sludge disposal alone, the transport is something like $1.5 million. And so instead of trucking it, 28, 60 miles away, et cetera, we'd be only going 7 miles away to the Annapolis landfill. And it's 28 miles to PG County for their yard waste. And again, it'll be 7 miles to the landfill. So we'll be saving quite a bit of money. I think it's, I think what we spend on carting waste to the landfill, the general waste, like food waste, would be, I think it's $50 a ton.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to get into the whole cost benefits now. We know you're gonna do the cost
right.
benefits. I just want to because
we'll take this to use the phrase offline, Jackie. But just to finish up, thank you, Devin. But just to finish up on, you start putting electric vehicles going back and forth and charging on the solar power there, and you get near zero out the transportation costs. It's a big winner, but I'll stop now. We'll go offline, but I think that's a huge home run opportunity.
When I get the updated memo from Jim Pittman, I'll see if that's something that Public Works is willing to share, if it's ready to share. Okay. I can send that to you guys. I also will mention that the DNR approached me, I believe I mentioned this a while ago, approached me about actually taking me up on my idea of the cigarette butt litter education campaign. Cigarette butts are the most prevalently found litter on shorelines and on beaches. And so they are awarding a $15,000 grant to the city to use Annapolis Grain as their contractor and continue our Plastic Free Annapolis campaign by adding this component. It will be a public education campaign. There will be TerraCycle containers where we can put them, not in the historic district, obviously, but places where people are standing around smoking, such as at bus stops and outside of bars like Stan and Joe's, Tsunami, et cetera, where a lot of young people congregate. This will most likely be spring ready. The grant starts in February to get it ready. So it will be, it's not, maybe down the road we'll see a cigarette butt campaign to eliminate all cigarette butts and not allow them to be disposed. We're fine. I don't know, but this is just a public education campaign at this point. So that is going to kick off in February. I'm just finalizing all the requirements for that right now with DNR. And this was the idea I came up with, keep your butt out of the bay, that the mayor loved. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to brand it. I think that's kind of catchy, but right now it's called But It's Plastic, which I don't think is nearly as fun.
No.
And then that was,
I wouldn't discount the historic district in that because that's not a permanent structure. I mean,
it's not a permanent structure, and you can put things up for 30, like signs. You can put up a sign for 30 days. Right. So it's something I have to work on. Yeah. I've got some time on it.
Make that a break.
Another no discharge zone for Anne Arundel County and Annapolis Waters. It was expected to be finalized in December. It looks like it's going to be finalized by EPA Region 3 in the end of January. We still have to have state enabling legislation for it, but we have the city put in $4,000 and the county put in $4,000 to give to the Severn River Association, who put in the application for us to do the education campaign materials, the signage, getting marinas up to speed, getting boaters up to speed for the spring boating season. So that's underway as well. And then the last thing I will mention is that just this past week, we started talking to, well, actually they're called MK Advisors. I got to know them through work with the Smart Energy Power Alliance on the microgrid study for Newtown 20. But they approached us with a grant proposal. They are writing the grant. They are the applicant. The city just has to participate. And I've been jamming all day to get this grant done with them. It's due Friday. So what this grant is looking at are resilience hubs throughout the city, using existing structures we use, such as Pit Moyer, some churches that we use for emergency centers, but to look at other locations where we might need resilience centers. And this is the intersection of alternative energy, such as solar, resiliency and community support and emergency preparedness. So these centers would be emergency centers for shelter, restroom facilities where you can plug in and power up, where you can keep your medications or whatever you need to have refrigerated, but at centers that aren't reliant on our existing energy sources. So most likely meaning powered by solar with a generator that's charged up by solar. So the facilities themselves would benefit by having an alternative power source, but then we would also have centers that are community centers that we know powered up because they're not relying on natural gas or electricity. So the grant would look at both microgrids in general and at resilience hubs. Yes.
What makes me smile, I don't know if anyone's been on this committee or remembers when I first stumbled in, however many years ago, and I sat as just citizen for, quite a while. Anywho, my whole catalyst was, my backyard looks out at the Clay Center, right in between Route Boulevard and Clay Center. So I look out not Clay Center, the Stanton Center off on Clay Street, and I saw the lights left on all night long, 7 nights a week. I'm like, so I go over there and I'm like, solar on the roof, lights, and it's so funny. It's right back where it was. It's still sitting there. I think the Stanton Center is an excellent cooling station in the summer. It's got a roof line that's above everything else. It'll create a lot of energy there, and the walls are pretty thick and it's low, so it retains cooling pretty well. It's not leaky, too leaky, and it's right off Clay Street, I think, and Route Boulevard, and on the way to the hospital.
So is there opportunity for people to work with you and give you ideas of what good centers would be?
Yeah. Well, let's assume we'll need to wait to see if we get the grant. This grant's going in Friday, and then
I didn't mean to interrupt too much, but it just made me chuckle because that's how I started in this whole thing, however many years ago. So it's the same project, but anyway. So carry on, and we'll catch up at some point.
And also, I saw Jeremy has his hand raised, so very politely. Jeremy, did you have a comment or question?
Well, my question just went back to the composting. I was curious if, Jackie, you knew what kind of composting system was being discussed. If it was like forced aeration or just passive turned piles.
Maybe static aerated piles, covered piles.
That's good to know. And I think, managing that way reduces the risk of NOx or greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we're going to have to do some community outreach on there. I think the closest community, what is it called? Rolling Knolls. That's right across from the bowling alley on Defense Highway. They're quite a distance from it, but, of course, we're going to have community questions about rodents and other wildlife being attracted to it, odors, leachate, stormwater runoff, all of those good things we're going to have to deal with on that site. But it's a site that's buffered, but heavily buffered by forest and other vegetation. There was a and a B option up there on the closed landfill. One would have taken down more forest. The option that they're considering more seriously takes down very, very few trees. That's the option I'm leaning towards as well. And it's on a side of the landfill, like right up against the solar park pretty much, where there's not going to be a lot of contact with people.
Okay,
so
anything else, Jackie?
Oh, there's so much more, but those are the highlights.
Well, okay, all right, sure. Yeah, we only have like 15 minutes left. So I did want to get to the discussion we were having on our last meeting, I guess it was, about the process for taking positions between meetings when we don't have time to take a vote. And Jackie did check with the city attorney for us, and he said we could adopt a procedure to do that and change the way we do that. And I thought one way of doing this, and I just want to propose it this week, and we'll send it out to you so you can look at it written down and react to it, and then maybe vote on this next week. It's something we want to use very, very sparingly, but every once in a while a project gets past us, and it's we see it for the first time on the planning commission hearing, and we don't have time to have a commission meeting on that. So we can either call a separate meeting, and that's very cumbersome to do and hard to get everybody's schedules. But when we're talking to the city attorney, we did think that we could agree on certain principles we have, like we want to minimize cutting forests, we want to save specimen trees, we want to minimize impervious surfaces, we don't want to crowd lots too much with development, and maximize stormwater treatment, maximize public access. So, we thought we could adopt a procedure for doing this, where we maybe give notice to the body that's having the hearing that, we are planning to vote on this at our next meeting, but our next meeting is coming after their hearing. So we would request that they leave the hearing open on that. And then we could either raise questions about these features of concern and state our general positions on these features of concern, like saving specimen trees, minimizing cutting the forest and things like that. So I wanted to just throw that out there and get your comments on that.
I had thought that Jackie's email on December 10th, I thought that meant that it says the commission may vote to change its rules. So couldn't we just say that we vote to not have to vote? I understand what you're saying about the overarching guidelines, but I guess, Jackie, I was wondering, can we just vote to not have to vote since we're advisory?
So to allow like the chair and the vice chair to develop a position and give a position on something.
Like it sounded like we could make up our own process.
You can revise your procedure. So you guys need to think about what that procedure would be and then vote on whether you want to revise that.
Yeah.
Maybe Devin can come up with a suggestion she can float around to people and different options.
Yeah, okay. So I mean my suggestion was, I guess we were thinking of letting the chair and vice chair take a position on things and then just come back and report out to the AEC about it. I think, when we should also,
as long as it met those main principles.
Right.
You guys are going to have to vote to adopt that ability to do that.
Right. So I thought there was either, two ways we could do this, and I'll write this down for us to consider at our next meeting, before the next meeting. But we could either, we could just vote to allow us to raise issues of concern, so they are on the table, and say we're going to take a position, please hold the meeting open for us. Or else we could do, say, let the chair and vice chair take a position consistent with the principles that we have here, and then have the AEC, just that would be the AEC position. But I think in any rate, we ought to CC the AEC every time we do it. and really use it minimally, sparingly, just in those odd cases where, something's on the agenda and we haven't seen it before, and we really feel it's important to weigh in. All right, so we'll take a look at that and get a proposal out to you all. So please, just have a look at that, well before our next meeting, so you can come and raise questions. And we'll also probably, Jackie, we should probably run it by the city attorney too.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay,
that's a good idea. Oh, another thing, Bevan, I don't know if this was brought up to you guys last time, but the Conservancy Board brought up the idea of having an ex officio member from the board participate in the commission meetings and vice versa, so that the two groups stay apprised of what the other is doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And actually, we had in our organizational meeting, we had asked for volunteers to be liaisons, and that is one spot that we need to fill. But I think, we would love to have somebody come. And speaking for myself, I would love to, but want to hear what others think about that too, and have one of our members be one of their ex officios. I see Kate nodding her head. Anybody else?
They only meet, by the way, they only meet every other month.
Oh, okay. So
and it's the
lighter lift.
It's the first Thursday of every month. Am I going to get that wrong? First Thursday every other month, and they met in January, so they won't meet again until March.
Mm-hmm. So I like that idea. We just need a volunteer for it, and we can follow up. You guys can email me and let me know who's the volunteer for that. But just the idea, does everybody like that idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my only question is what would be the difference between a liaison versus an ex officio member? Is there a difference in what we're asking?
I don't think there'd be a difference in what we're asking them to do, I guess an ex officio member probably gets the Zoom link without having to ask, maybe,
Why don't we just see if we can find someone to do it on a reliable basis, and after a couple of months, we can tighten up the role and
we can say
authority and stuff.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if they want to designate someone to attend your meetings, you guys, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'll let Joanna know. So they meet the second Thursday of the month, and that would be January. They already met, so next one will be March, and then May.
March. Okay. March.
They're going to with that schedule. I think that works for Hillary still.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we just have two. We have two liaison spots to fill. One was Spot Creek Conservancy, and the other was the Annapolis Conservancy. So I will send that around and see if I can get one of you all to volunteer. And you don't have to go to Spot Creek Conservancy meetings, even just like catch up with Amy, once a month or once every other month.
Yeah, Bevan, I actually just emailed you. I'd be willing to do Spot Creek.
All right, great. I've got you down. And then we just need Annapolis Conservancy. Okay. All right. Let me get back to my agenda. Let's see. I know we had Kate. Development review. I want to give you, I know you needed like 10 minutes. So I think if we don't have anything else to decide on, let's just give Kate the rest of the time for the review of development projects or whatever you need.
Okay. I actually don't think I'll need that much time because I wanted to ask Jackie. So there's a proposed project called the Primrose School, and it's on the corner of Spa Road. Anyway, so I reviewed the plans and it looks like they're taking down lots of trees. There's some specimen trees that they were going to keep or something. But I guess I wanted to ask Jackie, does it look like they're following the formula? Like, did you have any concerns when you reviewed it?
Primrose, I want to say, I'm getting my sites a little confused. I'm fairly certain that that's the one I put in some comments on to make sure that they are doing everything they can there to preserve some of those larger trees. And I didn't have a whole lot of comments on it apart from that.
Yeah, it was interesting because it seemed like it's only a 2-acre property. And right
Yeah.
now 0.8 acre of it is forested, and they're gonna take out 0.8, 0.78 or something, like pretty much every tree, and then replant all the trees. So I was just a bit confused on how that was gonna work, but do we have still an opportunity to comment, or have they approved? It didn't look like they were approved, the plans.
I don't know, Kate. I can check on it, to check with Tom Smith on it.
Okay, yeah. So obviously we would want to have them save more trees, existing trees, because I think it was Barbara's point earlier, an existing tree that's large is a lot better than a little stick that they just planted. So, so that's Primrose School. I think the only other development project that is happening right now is, or that we could comment on, is the Public Works. Jackie, you forwarded us some plans on January 5th. So I guess, yeah, I did not have a chance to review those, but are these plans up for debate, or can we comment on them, or?
I'm not sure no, that's a really good question. I know they're moving towards permitting already on that. So I don't know if there's still an opportunity. Again, I'll have to inquire of Public Works if there's any more opportunity or planning to comment. I don't know if you had particular comments. I reviewed that plan. That site was already cleared, as you all know, before the city purchased it. The county had already cleared it. I mean, the former owner of it had cleared it when it was part of the county property. And so there's no additional tree removal. There's an RSC system that will be headed downhill from the Public Works facility. There's also a lot of additional collection they did to make sure that no salt exits that new barn they've designated. The trucks will be able to pull all the way in to load and all the way out, and when they dump, they go all the way in, and et cetera. So there won't be as much debris as there was at the old facility. And they have, of course, good housekeeping practices for sweeping, et cetera. They have collection of the water from that area, that it goes through an additional rinse and filtration before being disposed. And they were not able to incorporate permeable pavers anywhere because of the heavy trucks that were going in and out. So they didn't have areas where they could do permeable paving there. But they're doing a lot of bioswales and vegetated plantings. I did make a couple of comments, like to make sure that they, if there's other opportunities for planting on the hillside, to do that, to reduce any sort of erosion from the site, to further slow down water that's not making it into the RSC system. I think they're trying to push most of the water into that RSC system.
Yeah. So we had a big presentation from the Public Works director, and we had written a letter that was really detailed. I would just suggest, if there is an opportunity for comment, to just like put that letter in that we had already kind of agreed on, or
Yeah, that was back in July.
Yeah, so
last year. I guess it would just be seeing which of those recommendations they actually took into
account. Okay. Yeah.
So that's do. But Jackie, you said it's already been it's already moving
I think
forward.
it's going into permitting. I know all the comments are in track it right now, and they also there's a green roof on part of that building. And let me see, there's something else they're doing. Oh, it's going to be LEED silver. They're going for LEED silver on the building itself. Yeah.
Okay, that was one of our recommendations. Okay.
Yeah.
So is that going to the planning commission, Jackie, or?
That is, I don't know, Bevan. I have to figure out where in the process it is.
Okay. Oh, all right. So maybe you can let Kate know, and then we can catch up and figure out what they've already taken from the suggestions in our letter, and if there's anything left over, we can just rework that and put that in, because we've already all discussed that and looked at that letter and okayed it. So I think we'll just give you the green light to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the question is, what happens to the the site, the old public works site, you know, how that will be used. And right now, there's no plan for it.
Uh-huh.
I asked Sally Nash about that. You know, there's no current thoughts even regarding how that will be used. A big question mark there is, of course, the remediation of that site soils. So
Yeah,
that's
the
an
salt.
issue. Right.
Yeah, which was one of those points in our letter too. Yeah, the salt.
Is that an area where Greenvest could play expertise and templating previous design examples and capital?
At the old public works site?
At any site where we're encountering issues such as, I mean, remediation is we're environmentalists. We want, remediation to be good. So when we go remediate a place, a location, it can be expensive and liability. So it would be nice to kind of offload that to private sector, Greenvest or somebody else.
Well, that's not what we're using the Greenvest contract for. We're using the Greenvest.
Well, I'm not saying for existing, but is there a firm like Greenvest or Stormwater RX in Oregon who has some expertise in this, and we could have a conversation with them?
I'm sure there are people that are expert in remediating.
I'll look into it and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Is there anything else? Kate, I think the 101, 103 Annapolis Street that we had testified on to save the two big specimen trees in the front. I don't think planning has decided yet, but I stuck around for the work session afterwards, and it looked like they were going to be able to redesign and save at least one of the really big trees.
That's right.
Yeah, but the important thing was also they were just going to move it back. So when they had an opportunity to replant the other big tree, it was going to be back in that line, so it wasn't right underneath the power lines, because you can't plant another big tree underneath the power lines. It'll just get all chopped up. So I think that was a win,
Yeah. I don't think we have to do anything further.
Yeah.
Right now, I would. We can provide input into the West Annapolis plan that they're working on. So I'm looking into that.
Okay. Great.
One quick comment on that I think that we talked about last time was related to the maintenance and bonding information that Jackie sent. Is that if the tree after development fails within, I think it was 2 years, they're still liable for that, and that there was some input there from the Planning Commission as to what the replacement had to be on that. So I don't know if it's I'll take the win as Bevan put it, but also if there's any interest too in going back and trying to get some more specificity for future replanting if that becomes necessary.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Jackie, was there something, do we have anything in code like that? Or is that something that the conditions that the Planning Commission will put on?
The maintenance of the tree?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of what the permit will say, that, that we always have that maintenance agreement with any of the developers.
Okay. So that's part of the permit of, all right.
There's a maintenance agreement
building permit
with every development.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is it standard, the tree, the failing and what they have to do? Is that a standard?
Yeah, that's in the code.
Okay.
Replacement.
And what you were saying, Jackie, last time is they do have some leniency in terms of the requirements. So they could specify whatever you replace, if this fails within X number of years, your replacement tree has to be at least 5 inches DBH or something.
Yeah, they can require a larger tree if they choose to. They have a motion to say, it doesn't have to be, I forgot what we require to be planted, what a 3-inch DBH, but we could require a 6-inch DBH, tree.
Yeah, and that was part of our comments too, was require bigger DBH trees.
Yeah.
Especially because these trees were so so big. Yeah. Okay, any other comments or questions? Oh, Jackie, was there any comment on the Parkside Preserve that development that I just looked at like a week or two ago, that's where they've just taken clear cut everything, and I mean, like, there's no topsoil even left, it's just bare.
So any comment in what particular regard?
Like, was that part of the plan? Are they violating anything, or was it, I mean, I did not I mean, when we were trying to save trees and that, and we did save a portion of it because the city ended up using program open space money to buy like a corner of it. I didn't realize that they were gonna, denude the whole landscape before they put in their development. And that's like 2 football fields long.
Yeah, I know. It looks really bad. So that was done like a year ago. A lot of the clearing was done like a year ago, and they did all the tree pruning and that they were required to do, although Brian Adams, the city forester, felt that at the time that the type of pruning they did would probably kill the outside row of trees along the forest part. But the clearing, I'm not sure if they were in violation for doing everything at once. I do know they've had a lot of runoff problems there. They've had a lot of silt fences that failed, and they've been cited a number of times for their sediment and erosion violations.
Okay. All right. Maybe that's something we can look at in the future to maybe get in the comp plan of some, like if we can do, if there's a better way to do more environmentally friendly subdivision, building.
Or not to allow a site to remain open for that long a period of time.
Yeah, nothing is stabilized. There's no grass growing anywhere or hay over it or anything like that. And there's just open,
that site has been brought to the attention of the code enforcement.
Okay.
Several times. Jesse Iliff, the Rundle Rivers Federation, has been really diligent about observing what's going on there and reporting violations that we've cited them for.
Okay. All right. Now I know it is, I think we're past 9 o'clock right now. So the only legislation that I know that is up right now was introduced was the bag legislation for plastic bags. And I know Rob had introduced something similar right before COVID hit, and we, encouraged him to back off and withdraw it because of the difficulties with COVID, and then kind of like the tenure it has with adding any cost to anybody or burden to any, especially something around groceries. So I was just going to talk to Alderman Schandelmeyer about it, but Jackie, did he withdraw that, or is that still moving?
Yeah, Alderman Schandelmeyer introduced it again. Was withdrawn last month or earlier this month.
Okay.
Yeah, it was withdrawn earlier this month. Delegate Learman introduced the Plastic Bag Reduction Act in the General Assembly. It eliminates the use of all bags, plastic bags. It does not provide for a fee for paper bags. It does not allow for compostable bags. And what it does to address the big question that came last year is that it preempts any other local government from introducing their own legislation, and it supersedes any existing legislation.
Okay, so his is removed then, or
removed. In the General Assembly, Delegate Learman's is moving. There's a Climate Solutions Now bill that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation was very involved in drafting. That one sets all sorts of greenhouse gas reduction targets, like 60% by 2045. Energy efficiencies, transportation money for electric school buses and electric vehicles, grants for planting. They have a goal of 5 million trees to be planted in the state, to grant money for that. Lots of unknowns about what mandates will be sent to the cities and counties resulting from that legislation, and if the state will provide funding. There's a number of bills, probably like 6 or 7 I've commented on and so far in the General Assembly.
Okay, all right, but yeah, I just want to make sure that if there was anything that we, should be looking out for, and I'll have
there's one that you might be excited about. There's a bill that was put in that provides the unconditional right to intervene in a suit brought by the state pursuant to the Clean Water Act. So if the state is suing Anne Arundel County for violations of Clean Water Act that also affect Annapolis. The city can intervene as of right. A resident can intervene as of right, and your property can intervene as of right, because the Court of Special Appeals has gotten this wrong a number of times.
Yeah, okay, so that's a standing, but that's a state bill. That's not something we're
It's
gonna.
a state bill again, so.
Yeah, okay.
And these are all state bills.
All right, and I'll just have to catch up with Rob to see where he is on his list of legislation. And I need to share that with Allison too, because she's gonna help me review legislation. So I think I don't want to keep you any later, but I know Randy, you had been working on the DEIJ, that list of recommendations for the city. So let's send that back around to everybody when we like Kate's gonna send, Ann's gonna send the to-do list of all these things we said we were gonna do. So let's send that back around with that and get people's comments and input on that so we can discuss that next time. And then also next meeting, we'll invite our liaisons to the different groups to give us an update on what's happening with the other groups. I also wanted to just mention our to-dos from last meeting. We did the input to the Greenway Master Plan. We did the comments to the Planning Commission about 101, 103 Annapolis Street. We turned in the annual report and we had our organizational meeting, so that we did a lot, since last month. We still have to do review that list of environmental justice actions. We wanted to set up that e-Track-It training, so I've got to get with Racine and do that. And then Paul, you had mentioned developing a solar energy brochure. I just wasn't clear. Was that for residents or developers to educate them on the benefits and the cost benefits? But we'll send that out we'll send this list out on the to-do list. I'll send this to Ann. So just what's our remaining to-do list. And also the tree canopy report from Brian Adams. We were wondering when that's going to be finished.
Oh, yeah. I asked Brian that about a few weeks ago, and he was going to follow up with the University of Vermont. I'll put that on my list too.
Okay.
Again on that. Okay.
All right. I'll send those my list of to-dos that we still have outstanding to Ann to collate with our other to-dos.
Sure, that sounds great. I would add one. I think we had a follow-up to work on our 2021 priorities. We were just going to sort of document them in a way that we could all refer back to. And I think that would be useful. And maybe if we could do that electronically before the next meeting.
Great. Okay.
I also wonder if there's a way, maybe I could take a pass at flagging the things that I think we can do offline or, over email before the next meeting, so that we don't do maybe all of our report outs during the meeting, that if we can do a quick update via email.
Yeah, we do definitely want to leave time for, especially, and if we need to take a position on something, we should get that done early on in the meeting. All right, sure. I put you down on that. And I'll send you those little to-do list that I have.
Great, sounds good.
All right, with that, I think if anybody has anything else, or we're ready to adjourn. Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next month and be in touch with our to-do list.